I never thought a chunk of gravel and asphalt could cause so much drama, but here I was, staring at an invoice for $3,000 from the Meadowbrook Heights HOA for snow removal services on a road that I personally funded, built, and maintained for the past 8 years. My name is Marcus Webb, and I bought my property in rural Vermont back in 2018, long before Meadowbrook Heights even existed as a concept in some developer's fever dream. The land was perfect. 23 acres of rolling hills with a clear view of the Green Mountains, dense maple forests on 3 sides, and complete privacy. The only problem was access. The previous owner had used an old logging road that was barely passable even in summer, and completely impassable once the snow started falling. So I did what any reasonable person would do. I hired a contractor, spent $42,000 of my own money, and built a proper private road from Route 7 all the way to my property line, roughly 0.8 of a mile of graded, graveled, and eventually paved paradise. I made sure to get everything legally documented. The road sat entirely on my property, carved through land I owned outright. My lawyer drafted easement agreements, we filed all the paperwork with the county, and I even put up signs at both ends clearly marking it as a private road. For 5 glorious years, it was just me, the occasional delivery truck, and the snowplow guy I hired every winter to keep it clear. Then Meadowbrook Heights happened. Some developer from Boston named Richard Carmichael bought up the farmland adjacent to my property and started building cookie-cutter McMansions marketed to remote workers fleeing the city. The development went up fast, too fast probably, and by late 2023, families started moving in. That was fine by me. I minded my own business, they minded theirs, and we coexisted peacefully. The problem started when they realized their cute little neighborhood backing up to conservation land had a major flaw in the developer's planning. Carmichael had built their main entrance off Hickory Lane, which was maintained by the town. But Hickory Lane was on the far side of the development, adding almost 4 miles to the drive into Burlington. My road, which connected directly to Route 7, cut that distance in half. You could practically see the wheels turning in their heads at the first HOA meeting they invited me to. I declined the invitation, naturally. I had not purchased property in an HOA, had no interest in joining one, and my lawyer confirmed I had zero obligation to do so. My land predated their development by years, and all my paperwork was airtight. That should have been the end of it, but the new HOA president, a woman named Cynthia Bradshaw, did not take no for an answer. She started showing up at my door unannounced, always with that fake smile plastered on her face and a clipboard tucked under her arm like some kind of suburban warrior going into battle. The first visit was in March 2024. I was in my workshop restoring a 1967 Mustang when I heard the doorbell. I wiped the grease off my hands and found Cynthia standing on my porch wearing a lavender cardigan and pearls, because apparently she thought she was attending a country club luncheon and not bothering someone on a Saturday afternoon. "Mark, it's so wonderful to finally meet you in person," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Cynthia Bradshaw, president of the Meadowbrook Heights Homeowners Association." I shook her hand briefly. "I know who you are, Mrs. Bradshaw. I got your letters." "Oh, wonderful. Then you know we'd love for you to join our community association. We have so many wonderful amenities planned, and your input would be invaluable as one of our more established residents." "I'm not a resident of Meadowbrook Heights," I said, keeping my tone polite but firm. "My property predates your development. I'm not interested in joining." Her smile tightened a fraction. "Well, yes, technically your property is separate, but we're all neighbors here. We really do think you would benefit from being part of our community initiatives. I appreciate the offer, but no thank you." "I see." She glanced down at her clipboard. "Well, there is one other matter. Several of our residents have been using your private road to access Route 7. It's much more convenient than going around through Hickory Lane. We were hoping to formalize an arrangement where the HOA could help with maintenance costs in exchange for an easement. There it was, the real reason for the visit. "The road is private, Mrs. Bradshaw. It's on my property. I paid for it, and I maintain it. It's not a public thoroughfare." "Yes, but surely you can see how beneficial it would be for everyone if we could share access. The HOA would be happy to contribute to maintenance." "I don't need help with maintenance, and I'm not granting an easement. If your residents are trespassing on my road, I suggest you tell them to stop." Her smile finally cracked. "Mr. Webb, I don't think you're being very neighborly about this. And I don't think you're respecting my property rights, Mrs. Bradshaw. Have a good day." I closed the door, perhaps a bit more firmly than necessary. Through the window, I watched her march back to her silver Lexus SUV, her back rigid with indignation. Over the next few months, the situation escalated in small, annoying ways. More Meadowbrook Heights residents started using my road, despite me putting up additional private road no trespassing signs. I would see them zipping past my driveway at all hours, some even waving cheerfully as if they had every right to be there. I called the sheriff's office, but they said it was a civil matter unless I wanted to press charges against individual drivers, which seemed like a huge hassle. Then came the winter of 2024-2025, one of the snowiest on record for Vermont. My usual snowplow guy, Dale, had been clearing my road after every storm for years. We had a simple arrangement. I paid him a flat fee for the season, and he made sure I could get in and out whenever I needed. But this winter, something changed. It was mid-January when Dale called me, sounding uncomfortable. "Marcus, we need to talk about your road." "What about it?" "Well, I got a call from that HOA lady, Cynthia something. She said since folks from the development have been using your road, she wants to set up a formal plowing contract with me. Said she'd pay me extra to make sure it gets done after every storm." I felt my blood pressure rising. "Dale, you work for me. I pay you to plow my private road." I know, and I told her that. But she was real insistent, said it was becoming a community road, and the HOA wanted to ensure proper maintenance standards. "It's not a community road. It's my road." "I'm with you, Marcus. I just wanted to give you a heads up. I told her I already have a contract with you, and I'm not interested in complicating things." "I appreciate that, Dale." But Cynthia was not deterred. A week later, after a particularly heavy snowstorm dropped 16 inches, I woke up to find my road had been plowed, but not by Dale. Some commercial outfit out of Burlington had done it, and they had done a terrible job. They had pushed snow directly into my driveway entrance, blocking me in, and scraped up the edges of the pavement where they had gotten too aggressive with the blade. I called Dale. "Did you plow my road this morning?" "No, I was planning to come by this afternoon." "Why?" "Someone already did it. Made a mess of it, too." "Huh. I wonder who Cynthia got to do it." That afternoon, I drove down to Meadowbrook Heights, carefully navigating through the snow pile someone had left at my driveway, and knocked on Cynthia's door. She answered wearing yoga pants and a fleece pullover, her blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail. "Mr. Webb, what a surprise. Did you hire someone to plow my road?" "Our road, you mean?" And yes, the HOA board voted to take over snow removal services for all community roads. We felt it was important to ensure consistent maintenance. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Mrs. Bradshaw, for the last time, that is not a community road. It's a private road on my property. You had no right to send anyone onto my land without permission." "Well, I think if you check the county records, you will find that roads used by the public for a certain period of time can become public easements. We're simply exercising our rights as community members." She was so smugly confident, so certain she had found some loophole. I wanted to argue, but I realized it would be pointless. Instead, I pulled out my phone and called my lawyer right there on her doorstep. Margaret, it's Marcus Webb. I need you to send a cease and desist letter to the Meadowbrook Heights HOA. They're trespassing on my property and claiming my private road is somehow a public easement." I could hear Margaret sigh through the phone. "I'll draft something this afternoon. In the meantime, document everything. Photos, dates, times." "Will do." I looked back at Cynthia, whose smile had faded. "You'll be hearing from my attorney. And if anyone from the HOA sets foot on my property again without permission, I'll have them arrested for trespassing." I turned and walked back to my truck, my hands shaking with anger. The cease and desist letter arrived at the HOA's registered address 3 days later. Margaret had made it crystal clear that the road was private property, that no public easement existed, and that any further trespassing would result in legal action. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. In late February, I received a thick envelope in the mail from the Meadowbrook Heights HOA. Inside was an official-looking invoice on fancy letterhead, billing me for $3,000 in snow removal services for the months of December through February. There was a detailed breakdown of costs, per storm charges, equipment fees, administrative overhead, and even a line item for management coordination. I called Margaret immediately. They billed me for plowing my own road. What? I could hear the disbelief in her voice. The HOA sent me a bill for $3,000, claiming they provided snow removal services. Services you didn't request and explicitly told them not to provide. Exactly. This is getting ridiculous, Marcus. I think we need to consider filing for a restraining order or an injunction. No, I have a better idea. Marcus, whatever you're thinking, make sure it's legal. Oh, it will be. Trust me. I hung up and immediately called Frank Morrison, a contractor I had worked with when I built the road originally. Frank specialized in fencing and gates, and I had a project for him. Frank, how much would it cost to install a heavy-duty gate at the entrance of my road? Something with a lock and maybe a card reader system. Depends on what you want. A basic gate, maybe $3,000 to $5,000. Something more substantial with automation and security, you're looking at $10,000 to $15,000. Let's go with substantial. I want it to be impossible to get around and tough enough that nobody can just smash through it. When do you want it done? As soon as possible. I can start next week if the weather cooperates. Perfect. I spent the weekend photographing every inch of my road, documenting the property boundaries, and reviewing all my original construction documents. Margaret had told me to document everything, and I was going to have an airtight case if this ended up in court. The following Monday, I drafted a formal response to the HOA's invoice. I kept it professional, but blunt. I had not requested their services, had explicitly told them not to provide services, had already contracted with my own snow removal provider, and would not be paying their fraudulent bill. I sent it certified mail and kept copies of everything. Frank and his crew showed up the next Tuesday with a massive steel gate and enough concrete to anchor it through a hurricane. The gate was a work of art, 12 feet wide, 8 feet tall, powder-coated black steel with decorative posts that still looked intimidating. Frank installed a keypad entry system on one side and gave me a remote control for easy access. He also installed a prominent sign, "Private road, no trespassing violators will be prosecuted." The installation took 3 days. During that time, several Meadowbrook Heights residents drove by slowly, gawking at the construction. One guy actually stopped and asked what I was doing. "Securing my private property," I said. "But how are we supposed to get to Route 7? Hickory Lane, same way you got in before. But that adds 20 minutes to the drive. Then I guess you should have considered that before buying in a poorly planned development." His face turned red, and he sped off, gravel spitting from his tires. When Frank finished, the gate was perfect, solid, secure, and completely blocking access to my road. I tested the keypad system multiple times, changed the code to something only I knew, and made sure the remote worked flawlessly. Then, I called Dale and gave him the new code so he could continue plowing as needed. The reaction from Meadowbrook Heights was immediate and explosive. My phone started ringing within an hour of Frank packing up his equipment. I didn't answer. Then the emails started flooding in, all forwarded from the HOA's group mailing list, even though I had never subscribed. Residents were furious, demanding I remove the gate immediately, claiming I was being unreasonable and selfish. Cynthia showed up at my door that evening, and this time, she wasn't smiling. "Mr. Webb, you need to remove that gate immediately." "No, I don't. You're blocking access to a community road. I'm securing my private property, Mrs. Bradshaw, something I have every legal right to do. You can't just cut off access like this. People have been using that road for over a year. Without permission, that's called trespassing. We'll sue you for this." "Go ahead. My lawyer would love to countersue for harassment, trespassing, and fraudulent billing. Oh, and speaking of which, I'm not paying your fake invoice." Her face had gone an alarming shade of purple. "You're being completely unreasonable. And you're standing on my property uninvited. Leave now or I'm calling the sheriff." She opened her mouth to argue, then apparently thought better of it. She spun on her heel and marched back to her Lexus, pulling out her phone before she even got to her car. I watched her gesture wildly while talking to someone, probably another HOA board member. That night, I didn't sleep well. I kept expecting someone to try to ram the gate or vandalize my property, but nothing happened. The next morning, everything was quiet. Too quiet. Around 10 in the morning, a sheriff's deputy pulled up to my gate. I walked down to meet him, noting his polite demeanor as I approached. "Mr. Webb?" "That's me. I'm Deputy Harrison. I got a call from a Mrs. Bradshaw claiming you've illegally blocked a public road. Mind if I ask you some questions?" "Not at all. Come on up to the house. I've got all the documentation you might need." I gave him the gate code, and he followed me up to my property. Inside, I spread out all my paperwork on the dining room table, the original property deed, the survey showing the road was entirely on my land, the construction permits, the private road designation, everything. Deputy Harrison reviewed it all carefully, taking his time. Finally, he looked up at me. "Mr. Webb, this all seems pretty clear. This is your property, your road, and you have every right to gate it off." That's what I thought. The HOA is claiming some kind of easement or public access, right? There is no easement. No agreement was ever signed. They just started using it and decided that meant they owned it. He nodded slowly. "I'll file a report stating that this is a civil property dispute and recommend they consult with their attorney. For what it's worth, you seem to have your ducks in a row." "I appreciate that, Deputy." After he left, I felt a small sense of victory, but I knew this wasn't over. Cynthia struck me as the type who would never admit defeat. I was right. A week later, I received a formal demand letter from the HOA's attorney, a guy named Preston Walsh from a firm in Burlington. The letter was full of legal jargon, but basically claimed that my road had become a public way through prescriptive easement based on open and notorious use by the public for more than a year. They demanded I remove the gate within 10 days or face legal action. Margaret laughed when I forwarded her the letter. Prescriptive easement? In Vermont, they'd need at least 15 years of continuous use, and you've been actively objecting the entire time. This is nonsense. So we ignore it? No, I'll respond. But honestly, Marcus, I think they're grasping at straws. They know they don't have a case, so they're trying to intimidate you into backing down. Not happening. Good. I'll make sure Mr. Walsh understands that. Margaret's response was a thing of beauty. She systematically demolished every argument in Walsh's letter, cited Vermont statute and case law, and made it clear that if the HOA proceeded with litigation, we would countersue for harassment, trespass, and abuse of process. She also demanded withdrawal of the fraudulent snow removal invoice within 10 days, or we would report them to the state attorney general for billing fraud. That got their attention. The invoice was quietly withdrawn, though no apology accompanied it, and Walsh's firm went silent, which Margaret interpreted as them advising the HOA to drop the matter. But Meadowbrook Heights residents were not ready to let it go. I started noticing cars driving slowly past my gate, people getting out to take photos. Someone spray-painted "selfish" on the gate one night, which I promptly cleaned off and reported to the sheriff. Deputy Harrison came out again, took a report, and suggested I install security cameras. I took his advice and set up a comprehensive camera system covering the gate and the first 100 yards of road. High definition, night vision, cloud storage, the works. Cost me another $2,000, but it was worth it for peace of mind. The cameras proved their value quickly. 3 nights after installation, they caught 2 teenagers trying to climb over the gate. I didn't recognize them, but based on their Meadowbrook Heights lacrosse hoodies, I could guess where they lived. I sent the footage to Deputy Harrison, who identified them and had a conversation with their parents. The kids showed up at my door the next day with their father, all 3 looking thoroughly chastened to apologize. "We're really sorry, Mr. Webb," the older kid said. "We weren't thinking. You were trespassing on private property. That's a crime." Their father, a tired-looking man in his 40s, nodded. "They understand that now. It won't happen again. See that it doesn't. Next time, I press charges." They left, and I felt a bit bad for coming down so hard on a couple of dumb kids, but I needed to make it clear that the gate was serious and not some kind of challenge to overcome. March turned into April, and the snow finally melted. My road was in perfect condition, maintained exactly how I wanted it. Meanwhile, I could see the toll the long route through Hickory Lane was taking on Meadowbrook Heights. Traffic patterns had shifted. People were complaining about the extra drive time, and property values were apparently taking a hit. I heard through the grapevine that several homeowners were furious with the developer for not securing proper access during the planning phase. That was when Richard Carmichael himself showed up at my gate. I watched on my security cameras as his Mercedes idled outside, and he got out to use the intercom system I had installed. "Mr. Webb, this is Richard Carmichael. I'd like to speak with you if you have a moment." I considered ignoring him, but decided I was curious what the developer had to say. I pressed the intercom button. "What do you want, Mr. Carmichael?" "I'd like to discuss a business proposition. May I come up?" "You've got 5 minutes." I buzzed him through and met him at my front door. Carmichael was in his early 50s, wearing an expensive suit that seemed ridiculous for a casual visit. He had the kind of tan that came from tropical vacations, not Vermont living. "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Webb. I know there's been some tension between you and the HOA. "That's putting it mildly." "Yes, well, I wanted to offer a solution that might work for everyone. I'm prepared to offer you $100,000 for an easement across your property. You'd retain ownership of the road, but Meadowbrook Heights residents would have legal access. We'd form a road maintenance association, share costs, and you'd have input on all decisions." It was a substantial offer, enough to make me pause and consider. But then I thought about Cynthia's smug face, the fake invoice, the harassment, the vandalism, all of it. "No," Carmichael blinked. "I'm sorry?" I said no, I'm not interested in selling an easement at any price. "Mr. Webb, be reasonable. $100,000 is more than fair market value." "I don't care if you offered $1 million. I built this road with my own money for my own use. Your HOA has harassed me, trespassed on my property, tried to bill me for services I didn't request, and vandalized my gate. Why would I reward that behavior?" "I understand you're upset, but that was the HOA acting independently. I'm trying to find a reasonable solution." "Then you should have designed your development with proper access from the beginning. That's not my problem to solve." His expression hardened. "You're making a mistake, Mr. Webb. This benefits everyone, including you." "I disagree. Now please leave my property." He stood there for a moment, jaw clenched, before turning and walking back to his Mercedes. I watched him drive away, then called Margaret to update her. "He offered $100,000 for an easement." "That's actually a decent offer, Marcus." "I know, but I don't trust any of them. The HOA has shown their true colors. If I give them an easement, they'll find 100 other ways to make my life miserable. Better to keep them at arm's length." "It's your decision, but for the record, I think you're making the right call. Sometimes it's not about the money." Exactly. Spring progressed into summer, and life settled into a new normal. My gate remained closed except when I came and went. Dale had the code and continued to maintain the road when needed, though in summer that mostly meant grading and pothole repair. I noticed Meadowbrook Heights had put up new signs directing residents to use Hickory Lane only, and traffic past my gate dropped to almost nothing. I thought maybe things were finally calming down. Then, in late June, I received a notice that Meadowbrook Heights HOA was suing me in Chittenden County Superior Court. The complaint alleged that I was unlawfully restricting access to a road that had become a public way, causing economic harm to the homeowners, and requesting the court to grant a permanent easement across my property in the public interest. Margaret was not worried. "This is a Hail Mary. They know they'll lose, but they're hoping you'll settle just to make it go away." "I'm not settling." "Good. We'll file our answer and counterclaims and let this play out. Discovery should be interesting. I want to depose Mrs. Bradshaw under oath." The legal process was slow and frustrating. Summer turned to fall, while lawyers filed motions and argued over procedure. The HOA's attorney, Preston Walsh, was competent, but working with weak facts. Every document supported my position. The road was private, on my property, built with my money, and never intended for public use. In September, we finally got to depositions. I sat in a conference room in Margaret's office while Walsh asked me questions for 3 hours. It was tedious, but straightforward. Yes, I built the road. Yes, it was on my property. No, I never granted permission for public use. No, I never accepted money from the HOA. Yes, I repeatedly told them to stop trespassing. Then came Cynthia's deposition, which Margaret conducted with surgical precision. I sat in on it, watching Cynthia squirm as Margaret walked her through every interaction, every demand letter, every instance of HOA overreach. Mrs. Bradshaw, when did you first become aware that Mr. Webb's road was private property? Well, he claimed it was private, but we believed it had become a community resource. That's not what I asked. When did you first become aware of his claim that the road was private? I suppose at our first meeting, back in March of 2024. And at that meeting, did Mr. Webb give you permission to use his road? Not explicitly, but we thought, yes or no, Mrs. Bradshaw, did he give you permission? No. Did he in fact tell you that residents should stop using his road? He said something along those lines, yes? And yet the HOA continued to encourage residents to use the road after that conversation, correct? We believed we had a right to access. Based on what legal advice? Cynthia hesitated. We consulted with Mr. Walsh. And when was that consultation? I don't recall exactly. Margaret produced a document. According to the HOA meeting minutes you provided in discovery, you didn't consult with an attorney until after Mr. Webb installed the gate in February 2025. Is that correct? I suppose so. So for nearly a year, you encouraged residents to use a road you knew the owner claimed was private without any legal advice supporting your position. We thought it was the neighborly thing to do. And when Mr. Webb continued to object, you sent him a bill for snow removal services he never requested, correct? The HOA board felt he should contribute to maintenance costs. Did you have any legal authority to bill him for services he didn't request? We thought we did. Based on what? Cynthia's face was red now. We were trying to do the right thing for the community. By billing someone for services they explicitly rejected? Mrs. Bradshaw, isn't it true that you sent that invoice to pressure Mr. Webb into giving you an easement? That's not how I would characterize it. Margaret let the silence hang in the air for a long moment. Let's move on. Tell me about the spray painting incident on Mr. Webb's gate. I don't know anything about that. You're aware it happened, though? I heard about it. Did you or any HOA board member encourage retaliation against Mr. Webb for installing the gate? Absolutely not. Did you discuss Mr. Webb at HOA meetings? Of course, he was blocking access to an important road. His private road. We disagree about that characterization. Margaret smiled, and I could tell she had everything she needed. The case dragged on through the fall. Both sides filed motions for summary judgment, asking the court to rule without a trial. Margaret was confident our motion would succeed, but I was prepared for it to go either way. In late November, Judge Patricia Morrison issued her ruling. I was at home when Margaret called, and I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. We won, complete victory. The judge granted our motion for summary judgment and denied theirs. She found that the road is unquestionably your private property, that no easement exists either by grant or prescription, and that the HOA's claims were without merit. What about our counterclaims? She's allowing those to proceed. We can continue with the harassment and abuse of process claims if you want, or the HOA can settle. What are you recommending? Honestly, I think you've made your point. The legal fees for this case probably exceeded what they would have paid you for an easement. They're not going to bother you again. If you want to twist the knife, we can pursue damages, but it's going to cost you more legal fees too. I thought about it. Margaret was right. I had proven my point. The road was mine, legally and definitively. Let's send them a settlement offer. They drop everything, pay my legal fees, and agree to a permanent injunction prohibiting them from trespassing on my property or contacting me about the road again. If they don't accept, we proceed with the counterclaims. I'll draft it today. The HOA's response came within a week. They accepted every term. The settlement agreement was signed before Christmas, and just like that, it was over. But the story doesn't quite end there. In January 2026, I heard through the local grapevine that Meadowbrook Heights was having serious problems. Several homeowners had filed suit against the developer, claiming fraud in the marketing materials that had shown easy access to Route 7. Property values in the development had dropped significantly, and some people were walking away from their mortgages. The HOA itself was in financial trouble, having spent nearly $60,000 on the failed lawsuit against me. Then, in February, I got an unexpected visitor. A woman in her early 30s with kind eyes and an apologetic smile knocked on my door one Saturday morning. "Mr. Webb, my name is Jennifer Torres. I live in Meadowbrook Heights, and I wanted to apologize." "Apologize for what?" "For everything the HOA put you through. I only moved here last summer, after most of the drama had already happened, but I've been reviewing the HOA records, and honestly, I'm appalled at how Cynthia and the board treated you." "Why are you reviewing HOA records?" "I'm the new HOA president. Cynthia resigned after the lawsuit settlement. The homeowners voted her out of the board entirely. We're trying to clean up the mess she left behind." I studied her for a moment. She seemed genuine. "Would you like to come in? I can make coffee." "I'd like that. Thank you." We sat in my kitchen, and Jennifer explained the situation. The development was in crisis. The lawsuit against Carmichael Development was moving forward, and it was becoming clear that the developer had cut corners in multiple ways. The distance issue with Hickory Lane was just the tip of the iceberg. There were drainage problems, shoddy construction, and unfulfilled promises about amenities. "We're not asking for access to your road," Jennifer said quickly. "I want to be clear about that. The settlement agreement stands, and we respect your property rights. I just wanted you to know that not everyone in Meadowbrook Heights supported what Cynthia did. A lot of us thought the whole thing was ridiculous." "I appreciate you saying that. There is one thing I wanted to run by you, though. Completely optional. No pressure whatsoever." "What's that?" "Some of the homeowners, including me, are looking into whether it's feasible to build a new road directly from the development to Route 7. It would go through the conservation land on the north side. We'd need permits, and probably some of the land would need to be purchased or easements negotiated. But if we could make it work, it would solve the access problem permanently." "Sounds expensive." "Extremely. But we might be able to get Carmichael to pay for it as part of the settlement in our lawsuit. The thing is, the most direct route would clip just a tiny corner of your property, maybe 50 feet along the northern boundary. We'd need an easement from you." I should have said no immediately. After everything I had been through, why would I help them? But Jennifer wasn't Cynthia. She was polite, respectful, and genuinely apologetic for the HOA's behavior. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A very narrow easement, just wide enough for a road, along the northern edge of your property where it borders the conservation land. You wouldn't see it or hear it from your house. We'd pay fair market value for the easement, plus we'd commit in writing that Meadowbrook Heights would have no other claims on any of your property, ever. We'd also pay to upgrade your road surface, seal coat it properly, whatever you want." "Let me think about it, and I'd need my attorney to review everything." "Of course, take all the time you need. Here's my contact information." She handed me a card and left. Oi. I called Margaret immediately and explained the offer. "Well, this is a twist. What are you thinking?" "Honestly, I'm inclined to consider it. If they're going to pay market value, upgrade my road, and give me ironclad guarantees that they'll leave me alone, maybe it's worth it. The corner they're talking about is just trees. I never use that area." "Let me review their formal proposal when they send it. But Marcus, make sure this is what you want. You've fought hard to maintain your boundaries." "I know, but Jennifer seems different. And if this helps them fix their community while keeping them away from my main road, maybe everybody wins." Over the next few months, I worked with Jennifer and the new HOA board to hammer out an agreement. Margaret negotiated aggressively on my behalf, and we ended up with a deal that gave me $75,000 for the easement, a completely resurfaced main road with proper drainage, and a binding agreement that Meadowbrook Heights would make no further claims on any of my property. The new road they built would be entirely separate, and my gate would remain permanently closed to their residents. The agreement was signed in April. Construction on the new road began in May, and by August it was complete. Meadowbrook Heights finally had proper access to Route 7, and I had a beautifully maintained road, a hefty payment in my bank account, and legally enforceable peace and quiet. Cynthia Bradshaw, meanwhile, had become something of a pariah in the community. I heard she and her husband sold their Meadowbrook Heights house at a loss and moved to New Hampshire. Some of the homeowners who had supported her initially ended up as targets of the lawsuit against Carmichael Development when it came out that she had been receiving kickbacks from the developer in exchange for pushing his agenda. That explained a lot of her aggressive behavior. The criminal investigation into those kickbacks was still ongoing, last I heard, with the state attorney general looking into possible fraud charges. Turned out Cynthia had been using HOA funds to pay for personal expenses too, disguising them as administrative costs. The new board had turned over all the financial records to prosecutors, and Cynthia was facing serious legal trouble. In September 2026, I was working in my garden when I saw Jennifer drive up to my gate. I walked down to meet her. "Hey, Marcus, just wanted to update you on something." "What's going on?" "Cynthia was arrested this morning. Wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy. The full list of charges is pretty long. The FBI got involved because she'd been running similar schemes with HOAs in Massachusetts before she moved here." "Wow." "Yeah. Turns out she wasn't even a homeowner in Meadowbrook Heights initially. Carmichael hired her to run the HOA and push residents to accept his cost-cutting measures. She was basically a plant." "That's insane." "The whole development was a house of cards. We're still dealing with the fallout. But I wanted you to know because, well, you were one of her first victims. If you want to file a complaint with the prosecutors, they're taking statements." "I'll think about it. The settlement covered my costs, and honestly, I just want to move on." "I understand. We all do. But thank you, Marcus, for listening when I came to you, and for being willing to work with us after everything that happened. The new road has made a huge difference for everyone." "I'm glad it worked out. And Jennifer, for what it's worth, you're doing a good job with the HOA. You're nothing like Cynthia." She smiled. "That's the nicest compliment anyone's given me in months." After she left, I walked back up to my house and looked at my road, my beautiful private road that I had built and fought to protect. The gate stood at the entrance, solid and imposing, a monument to property rights and the importance of standing your ground. I never did file a complaint against Cynthia. The legal system was already grinding her into dust, and I had no desire to spend more time dealing with her in any capacity. Margaret sent me updates occasionally. The criminal case was proceeding, and Cynthia was looking at serious prison time. Life settled into a comfortable routine. The new Meadowbrook Heights board was professional and respectful, keeping their distance and honoring every term of our agreement. My road stayed private, my gate stayed closed, and my property remained exactly as I wanted it, quiet, peaceful, and mine. 1 year after the settlement, in November 2026, I was splitting firewood when Deputy Harrison pulled up in his cruiser. I waved and walked over to meet him. "Morning, Deputy. Everything okay?" "Just checking in, Mr. Webb. Haven't heard from you in a while. Figured I'd make sure everything was good out here." "All quiet. The HOA finally learned their lesson." "I heard about Cynthia Bradshaw's arrest. Federal charges, right?" "That's what I heard. She ended up being a lot more crooked than anyone realized." "Well, her trial's coming up next month. Prosecutors asked me to testify about some of the complaints you filed. Figured I'd give you a heads up in case you get a subpoena." "I appreciate that, though honestly, I hope I don't have to get involved." "I don't think you will. They've got plenty of evidence without your testimony, but you never know with federal cases." He left, and I went back to my firewood, hoping that was truly the end of it. December came and went. Christmas was quiet and pleasant. I spent New Year's Eve alone, which was exactly how I preferred it, watching the snow fall and feeling grateful for my peaceful piece of Vermont paradise. Then, in mid-January 2027, Margaret called with news. Cynthia took a plea deal. 15 years federal prison, full restitution to all the HOAs she defrauded, cooperation with ongoing investigations. She's done. Good. There's more. Carmichael Development filed for bankruptcy. The lawsuits were too much, and it turns out Richard Carmichael had been running a larger scheme across multiple states. The SEC is involved now. It's a whole thing. What happens to Meadowbrook Heights? The homeowners will be okay. They own their houses, and the HOA is functionally independent now. The amenities that were promised but never built will probably never materialize, but the core development is stable. Jennifer and her board have done a good job getting things under control. That's good to hear. Marcus, I think this is really over now. Cynthia's going to prison, Carmichael's company is defunct, and the HOA has moved on. You can finally put this whole nightmare behind you. She was right. It was finally, truly over. Truly. I hung up the phone and walked outside into the cold January afternoon. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. My road stretched out before me, clear and well-maintained, the gate standing solid at the entrance. I had paid to build that road. I had fought to protect it, and now it remained what it had always been meant to be, mine. Over the following months, I occasionally saw Jennifer around town. She always waved and said hello, but she never brought up HOA business, and I appreciated that. Meadowbrook Heights continued to function under her leadership, and from what I could tell, it had become a reasonably pleasant community once the bad actors had been removed. In spring, I decided to make some improvements to my property. I used the easement money to build a proper barn for my classic car projects, expanding my workshop considerably. I also put in a greenhouse for year-round gardening, something I had always wanted but never prioritized. Dale continued to maintain my road, and we settled into an easy friendship. He'd plow in winter, grade in spring and summer, and we'd sit on my porch drinking beer and talking about nothing important. It was exactly the kind of simple, uncomplicated relationship I valued. One afternoon in June, almost exactly 3 years after the whole saga had begun, I was working in my greenhouse when I noticed someone standing at my gate. The security camera alert had gone off on my phone, but I'd been elbow-deep in potting soil and hadn't checked it immediately. I walked down to find a young couple with a toddler, looking somewhat lost. "Can I help you?" I called out through the gate intercom. "Oh, hi. We're so sorry to bother you. We're thinking about buying a house in Meadowbrook Heights, and the real estate agent mentioned something about a private road dispute in the past. We just wanted to understand the situation before we made an offer." I could have been annoyed, but they seemed genuinely polite and concerned. The dispute was resolved years ago. The development has its own access road now, completely separate from mine. My road is private and will remain private, but that shouldn't affect your decision to buy there. They've got good access to Route 7 through their own road. "Oh, that's a relief. The agent made it sound like there might still be ongoing issues." "Nope, all settled. The HOA is under new management too, much more professional than it used to be. Thank you so much for explaining. We really appreciate it." They left, and I realized that the whole saga had become part of the local lore, a cautionary tale about HOAs and property rights that would probably be told for years to come. That evening, I sat on my porch with a bourbon and watched the sunset. My phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. "Saw the final report on Cynthia's case. She's in federal prison in Pennsylvania. Asset forfeiture means she's lost everything. Justice served." I raised my glass to the setting sun. Justice had indeed been served, though it had taken years and considerable effort. The story of my private road had started as a simple property dispute, but had evolved into something much larger. A multi-year legal battle, criminal charges, federal investigation, and ultimately the exposure of widespread fraud, all because one woman had refused to respect property boundaries and had overestimated her authority as HOA president. In the end, I had protected what was mine. The HOA had learned a hard lesson about property rights, and a criminal had been brought to justice. The road I had built remained private, the gate remained closed, and my life remained peaceful. Sometimes standing your ground is expensive, frustrating, and exhausting, but sometimes it's also absolutely necessary. I had built that road with my own money for my own use, and no amount of HOA entitlement or pressure was going to change that fundamental fact. As darkness fell over the Vermont mountains, I finished my bourbon and headed inside, grateful for the silence, the solitude, and the satisfaction of knowing that my private road would remain exactly that, private. The gate stood at the entrance, a permanent reminder that property rights matter, that boundaries must be respected, and that sometimes the most important word you can say is simply no. Years from now, when the story of the Meadowbrook Heights HOA dispute is told, I hope the lesson is clear. Respect private property, respect people's boundaries, and understand that being part of an HOA board doesn't give you unlimited authority to do whatever you want. My road had cost me $42,000 to build and considerably more to defend, but it was worth every penny. Because at the end of the day, it wasn't really about the road at all. It was about principle, about standing up for what's right, and about refusing to be bullied into giving up something that was rightfully mine. The gate remained closed, the road remained private, and I remained peacefully isolated on my 23 acres of Vermont paradise, exactly as I had always intended,